And we're not even going to do a count in. No
No
countdown
countdown,
today.
folks. We're
No
here.
countdown. Hey, good morning. Hey, Bennett.
Hello, Rayanne.
How are you?
Doing
I'm
good.
I'm somewhere in Boise. Somewhere
Boise.
in Boise, Idaho. So I had a funny experience this morning.
That's
Really quick, down at the breakfast nook area, in hotels, I was having breakfast, and the person sitting next to me, I hear him lean forward to his wife, and he says, "It's really disappointing when you drive this far down south and it snows during the night." I'm like, "Dude, you got to drive further south than Boise if you want to avoid snow." I just post something on Facebook, and also 2023 has its own ideas about weather, so don't
Yeah.
don't
Yes.
even
Well,
try to understand it.
yeah. Well, we're very privileged to have Stephen Rothberg from College
Yes.
Recruiter and also High Volume Hiring Podcast, right? So,
Yeah.
welcome, Stephen, to our On the Edge edition. We love to have guests pop in every so often, and I thought I've been thinking about college recruiting for quite some time. It's been, for me personally, a passion. I've worked on a ton of organizations, campaigns in the past, and then certainly working in on the technology space, helping with various aspects of college recruiting. So, but definitely want to welcome. Maybe you could just do a quick introduction, Stephen, and we'll kind of just jump into talking about a little bit about what the state of college recruiting, campus recruiting, early career talent, whatever the new name is, it's all about.
Cool. Well, let me just say for at the beginning, maybe we reevaluate at the end of the session whether you're still happy that I was a guest. But anyway, the thoughts are good. So I founded the company that College Recruiter grew out of about 3 decades ago. College Recruiter believes that every student and recent grad deserves a great career. It's a job search site. Our customers are primarily employers that advertise their jobs with us. Pretty much anything that requires 0 to 3 years of experience, and we can probably get into the why that versus just say internships.
Right.
We help a little over 13 million students and recent grads globally find part-time, seasonal, internship, and entry-level jobs a year. We've been around for a long time. Our business model has evolved, never pivoted, different thing.
Right.
And it's fun. It's as I think you two would probably agree, if we all remember that at the end of the day, what we're doing is helping people find great careers. I don't think there can be any greater honor than that.
Right. Especially that first career, right? That first big milestone movement beyond working in the hourly type of job. But not the great hourly, but it's that first knowledge.
I always called it the big kid job.
The big kid job. That's a great way, because I'm just like, I'm obviously mumbling with words, trying to figure out, like, there's so many PC words that are just like,
right.
Should I use that? Can I use that?
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you this, like, back when I was working at a company called Krueger, I was writing a lot of content. Krueger was a career educational platform. But I recollect very strongly about feedback that came around that says, we're just not here to hire millennials at that time. And all of a sudden they said, we would like to prefer to use the word early career. I said, So that was my first introduction to kind of the shift in how to kind of frame, the whole kind of first, I wouldn't say first big kid job, because for some folks it's just an extension. I'm not sure, because education is so continuous now, right? It's I think that is the interesting aspect is that, folks are, getting educated, re-educated for all sorts of different things. So this whole notion of just referencing a generation was a bit of a, in their words and their eyes, a bit of a biased approach to what they were trying to get accomplished. So that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s who were doing one thing, and for any number of reasons, they get out. Maybe they go back to school. Maybe they don't, which is part of the whole early careers thing, is not tying it to college or university. I think that's very healthy. It's a big step in the right direction.
Right.
So I
Right.
still see loads of organizations calling it university recruiting, university relations, campus recruiting,
Right.
whatever. And it's probably accurate for those organizations, but I don't think it's preferable. I think
Right.
that they should be more open to hiring people out of boot camps, ex-military, career changers. I mean,
Great
you can
point.
go to one of the like massive online open schools and learn in 6 months what somebody in 4 years didn't learn.
Right.
Why would an employer not want you simply because you don't have a piece of parchment that you hang on your wall?
Right. Which, by the way, I still need to collect mine. I never did pick it up.
You know what? I'll send you mine, and you can hang mine up. Mine's like I don't know
Hey,
where it is.
Bennett, I will look it up, the logo for your school, and Canva is our friend.
You're gonna create me a document.
I'll make you a diploma, okay? We could even have a ceremony.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, the next one. Awesome. Yeah. No, I mean, that was kind of my first, like, when I started to hear early career, just definitely expanded my mind. But yeah, you're right, Stephen, in terms of there's so many reference points to just campus recruiting. And that's just like, and I'm just, at least from, pandemic time, is campus recruiting even relevant in terms of what it really is in today's world, and the concept of, campus recruiting seems to obviously have dramatically changed in 2 years to something much more virtual. So you're not really visiting campuses anymore, I guess, I would assume.
Yeah, no, I think in a lot of almost everything you said, I would agree word for word.
Yeah.
The very end, we can debate that. So I guess the way that I would put it is that the world of early career, early talent, college recruiting, call it what you may.
Yeah.
In 2020, looked almost exactly like it did in 1952.
Yeah.
There were some bells and whistles. The hotels were a little bit nicer. The airplanes were a little bit faster, easier to rent a car.
Sure.
The technology in some ways was better, in some ways worse. But at the end of the day, it basically involved flying a bunch of recruiters and hiring managers around the country,
right,
for a couple of months, meeting with a very exclusive group of students, and I say that in a negative sense, the opposite of inclusive.
Yeah.
Going to the same schools year after year after year, recruiting the same kinds of students year after year after year, and then claiming that diversity is really important to you because you sent one recruiter one day to one HBCU.
Right.
And not having any real metrics on what that was costing you. And also one of the dirty, dark secrets about the way college recruiting used to be,
right,
is that the planning to do it properly, the hiring managers would need to give the requisitions to the university recruiting team at least 12, sometimes 15 months ahead of that person showing up.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you imagine, in 2023, with how volatile everything is, how can a hiring manager accurately predict whether they're going to have a job, whether their company has a bank account, whatever, 15 months from now? It's asinine.
Yeah.
And there is this thing called the internet. I don't know if you guys agree, but I think that most students skew younger. People who are younger tend to use technology pretty well. I don't think you have to get on a frickin' airplane and go to a hotel and wine and dine a professor and get 50-yard seats at the homecoming game is a necessity to recruit the people that you need. Yeah. But it sure is a nice gig for those who get to do that.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think, I think back in the day, again, at Krueger, what we ended up calling that very selected group of colleges was, a lot of it was influenced, like you mentioned, by hiring managers. So it would end up being kind of what we coined, or what the industry coined, mini-me hiring. It's like, I just want to hire people who look like me, which means they graduated from the same college as me. And that was the influence. That's how they picked colleges. And then the
Mhm.
data ends up showing that some of their top potential performers were folks that had no relationship to the hiring manager's existing college brand or GPA or anything like that. So, that was Krueger was in the early days of creating this notion that it seems to have resurged in terms of the idea that we don't have to look at GPAs, we don't have to look at college brands to determine those are not predictable of success. So Krueger, came out with this whole idea of grit over grades in the context that they were looking at potential. Because I do feel like I'd be interested to hear what some of the trends are. Like, how do recruiters are so accustomed to seeing obviously a really kind of deep, rich resume with all sorts of knowledge, all sorts of work history, all sorts of experiences, and honestly, that probably is. I would equate early career resumes to look more are a lot more slimmed down, not as rich because the experiences just haven't been accumulated yet. Potentially for some folks, yeah, but resumes don't look the same for, I would say, early career as they do for mid-career folks. So I'm just interested to hear, what are ways that you're seeing or hearing recruiters being able to evaluate? What are they evaluating, early career talent for? Is it potential? Is it something else?
So let's separate out sort of what a lot of recruiters are still doing.
Yeah.
Versus the ones that are actually having a lot of success.
Yeah.
Right. Two different groups. And I'm saying that in a very judgy kind of way. So,
don't worry.
What I see from the ones who are really being innovative and who are trying to align their tactics with their goals in a direct way as possible without a bunch of proxies. Like, what school did you happen to go to? Right. For most organizations, there's really very little correlation between the school and your productivity. And EY, oh man, it probably goes back 8-9 years now. They did this big study in the UK, and they showed that there was an inverse correlation between the quality, the perceived quality of the school, like rankings, versus the productivity in the workforce. Why is that? Because the better the school you go to, the shorter you tend to stay with your first employer. If you hire that awesome accounting major and she leaves you 14 months later, she's not going to be as productive as, her younger cousin who went to a third-rate school and stays with you for 12 years.
Right.
So that's something that some of these employers are starting to grasp. What I see more and more employers doing is using, I would call them modern assessments. So God forbid, not Myers-Briggs, and stuff like that, which is fun. It's Myers-Briggs is fun, and so are Ouija boards, and neither one of them have any validity to them. But some of them, like Plum, Modern Hire, some of those organizations where there's actually scientific data where you put a group of candidates through the assessment and then watch what they do. Do they get hired? Do they stay with you? Are they productive? Versus those that don't. And that's one of the things that a lot of organizations miss out on is that A/B testing. In order to validate an interview question, an assessment, you've got to ask some of the candidates to do that and some not. And then you need to be patient and see what the results are. I interviewed for the High Volume Hiring podcast, the data scientist at Modern Hire. And it was so refreshing to hear that voice from outside our industry that really knows how to design a questionnaire, understanding that if you ask somebody 20 questions and you find out that
science behind it.
And if you ask somebody 20 questions and you find out that 2 of them are actually having no impact on who advances, who doesn't, who gets hired, who does. Stop asking the questions. I don't care that your CFO went to the University of Chicago and graduated with, a graduate degree in economics 47 years ago, and this was important when he got hired. Great. congratulations.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter now.
It doesn't matter.
These candidates that we're hiring, it's not impacting our results. So why are we wasting time?
Yeah. Do you find that in the genre of early career that they are more experimental? Are they willing to take those bigger risks on things, or do we?
We're still talking about the world of work now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That work. The world of work are, I feel early career. First of all, you have an opportunity to take more risk and
Yes.
be more creative, right? I mean, if we're, not only from how you go about hiring, but certainly like, your brand messaging, your visual identity, you can just be a little, you have that opportunity to just be a little bit more avant-garde, because it has, it depends upon various things, but certainly at that point in time, you'll realize that whether or not you could take big risks on some of those things. Because I'll tell you that when I did a great college campus recruiting, or campaign for Stratus Computers in Boston back in the day when they still were around, we really played up this whole notion. Stratus Computer, for those who are not as familiar, they're a fault-tolerant computer system, which means they're always on. There's never a situation. So we felt that we're going to make this campaign super, entertaining. Like, so we actually, the whole theme and the headline was nag, nag, nag. And it was it was a big visual of a nun with a ruler. Because that was the kind of core we always knew and had this kind of assimilation. So, but back to my point is, from using different types of tools and such, you see early career talent hiring practices to be more experimental and risk taking, where they're trying some of these new tools that may not be yet well welcomed by other parts of an organization.
On the candidate side, I think the candidates are more open and willing to take chances, and some of that is they don't know what they don't know. None of these people grew up with Monster being anything other than an energy drink.
Sure.
And so using tools or something along those lines that might be new to them is not as frightening, because most of it is pretty new to them. On the employer side, I kind of see the opposite. Those who are in the university relations early career departments, a lot of them have gravitated to those departments and have sort of like dug in their heels in how those departments operate, because the 1952 model of traveling to all the campuses, the wine and steak dinners, the meeting with professors, the homecoming tickets, all of that's a big perk to those jobs, right? And every job should have perks. I'm not saying that their job shouldn't have perks, but let's be realistic. Going to the homecoming game with the professor that you had 2 years ago is super fun.
Oh, yeah.
And it's super unproductive in terms of actually being able to hire. We can pretend that it is. We're building relationships and whatever, but you can't tell me that any student is going to give a rip that you just sat next to the professor that they despise for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh my gosh, too funny. For sure.
We did get a question here from Dr. Jim. He says, I heard something on another podcast where the guest mentioned that employer branding is overrated and a waste of time. I found that odd. Those of us that work in this find that odd as well. But
can I give you my 2 cents worth on this?
Yeah, let's hear
it. We definitely want to hear what your thoughts on employer branding is.
So my 2 cents on this is that until probably 2 months ago, I would have said to Jim that wherever he heard that, those people should be slapped, and that branding does matter.
You're right.
However, what I'm starting to think, and this has been the light here was turned on by Bill Borman out of the UK, and what Bill talked to me about when I was together with him maybe last summer. Yeah, I think like August or something like that. We talked about this for probably 15, 20 minutes. And what he told me was it matters a lot. It's super important.
Right.
But it doesn't matter as early in the process as most of us think for most positions, right? So the three of us are fortunate.
Right.
We're all still here.
Right.
Right. We're relatively far along in our careers.
Yep.
If we were to switch jobs, we'd be highly selective. And we wouldn't be applying to high volume hiring kinds of roles. Most of the labor force doesn't look like us.
Right.
Right.
They are applying to high volume roles. They are not selective, right?
Right.
Why are you interested in working for this company? Because I'd like to pay my rent. That is the truth for the vast majority of people in the workforce. Let's not fool ourselves.
Totally.
Your job is 2 miles from my home. It pays me enough. I probably am going to get along well enough with my boss that I'm not going to have to serve prison time. Sign me up. That's the way it is for most people.
No, it's absolutely true.
Well, example of that,
then
this morning I was just kind of messing around and decided to apply to a job at Starbucks. Just out of the blue, I thought, I saw a really cool post on, I think it's just called Starbucks Jobs, which is a Instagram channel that's really popular. And it was so interesting how different it was than like LinkedIn Apply.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To apply to through a horrible ATS. I mean, just horrible.
Right.
Right. So the majority, you're right. The majority of the workforce isn't experiencing that. Every time they apply for a job, they are having this horrendous experience.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
What Bill shared with me, and I've thought a lot about this, especially because, I'm the owner of a job board, is that the vast majority of candidates applying for the vast majority of roles, not everybody, not every role, but the bulk of the workforce, they're looking literally at three different things. The first thing that they look at is the job title. The second thing they look at, good thing I'm pointing it that way, is the location, the geographic location of the job, which includes remote, not remote, but even just the Starbucks. Is it the closest one, or is it 2 hours away? Right.
Sure.
And wages.
Yeah.
So most employers, different topic for a different podcast probably, but most employers aren't sharing that third one.
Nope.
And so right away, they're losing like a third of the reason why people apply. And then they wonder why they're not getting as many applications as they want. It's like, okay, again, another story for another day. What Bill said for the vast majority of roles, and I think he's really right, and I see this on our site too, is that candidates pay almost no attention to the organization they're working with, the department, their manager, the brand, the products, any of that stuff, until they hear back from the employer. As soon as they hear back from the employer, that's the first thing they do. They go to your career site. Maybe they go to a place like a Glassdoor, and that's when your brand becomes important. So it is really important, but it's not about attraction. It's more about selection, the candidate selecting you.
Does that depend on the company though? Because Starbucks, they have a great brand. They have a great employer brand.
Do they? Do candidates know that before they apply to Starbucks? Do they know what Starbucks employer brand is?
Yeah, I've known a lot of Starbucks employees over the last 20 years. And the majority of them use it as supplemental income to a hobby, right? So they are either going to school, they're in community theater or independent theater. They spend a lot of time producing films on their own. Right. So they've got this artistic side, and they know that working for Starbucks will be regular income. It fulfills, especially if you're a barista or at the cash register, it fulfills a need if you're an extrovert, like somebody who's in theater or producing films, that kind of thing. And they also know that there are benefits for less than full-time work, and that there's opportunity for them to have an investment in the company. Like they can get Starbucks stock.
You clearly know a heck of a lot more about Starbucks than I do. I'm a customer. That's it.
Okay.
And Starbucks, you're right, Rayanne. Starbucks some employers may be different than the general rule.
Sure.
I can absolutely see that. My pushback on what you said, and I don't know this, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate, is for people who are starting their job search and starting to apply to jobs, do those people know that about Starbucks? Or is it only people who have decided to apply, maybe already have applied, maybe are already working there? Like, I would not have thought about going to work at a Starbucks as an income stream to like fund a hobby kind of thing. That would never have occurred to me. What would have occurred to me with a Starbucks is that there are a lot of younger people who work there, which to me implies there's lots of part-time opportunities. So if I'm in school or something, I can probably fit that in well with my schedule. But
free coffee. I did read.
Yes.
On one of the Starbucks.
Cheers for that.
Yes. Cheers for that.
Instagram account. Somebody wrote, "Oh, you mean I get more than free coffee if I work for Starbucks?" You know?
No, I mean, I think there, and that is the power of their consumer brand, right? I think consumer consumer's brand is so powerful that
it
you could
overlaps.
say it's hot. You could say it's hot.
It's hot. It's hot.
It's
spicy. In comparison
vanilla. I mean, we could call it all kinds of.
I think you find that with a lot of really strong consumer brands, they can have, like Disney's the same thing, right? It's like people have an immediate reaction to that brand simply because they know it so well as a consumer. But for all those other companies, especially in the tech sector, who are trying to bring on board engineers, I'm not sure how many of these early stage companies even have any sort of reputation. So I can immediately kind of align with Stephen on, like, they're probably just going to look, they're going to apply just because they see the position, they see the location, they see the pay range, and boom, then I will. But so I think that's how like smaller brands get applications, is because if smaller brands should lean on those three things much heavier because they don't have a brand connection yet. So
and if the three of us, if we each ran our own retail stores, heads of talent acquisition, right? And I'm the typical employer, and I take 10 days to get back to that applicant, right? And it's way better than I am. He takes 8 days to get back to that applicant, and Rayanne gets back to that applicant in 8 hours.
Okay.
Rayanne is she's gonna get the interview the next day. She's going to extend a job offer within a day or two, and that person is going to start a day or two later. The person has started with Rayanne before Bennett has even contacted them. So when Bennett gets ghosted by the applicant, why is and that's another thing that when I think of like traditional university recruiting departments taking 15 months to go from rec to start, when things are actually being measured in days,
hours in some situations, right? I think the challenge for some of the more knowledge worker internships, like is because of that big time period of, yes, I may have hired you in the fall campus, but you don't start till summer. The amount of effort that now needs to do not keep them warm from jumping ship to another internship.
You need to pay them for that time,
right? You should employ them the day you hire them,
or something like that, because they're gonna be gone. Right? And I recently read, and this is probably at the advent of Reels and TikTok, is that our attention span.
Are we allowed to say TikTok, by the way? Is that still legal?
I'm going to still say it.
Is it still open in the US?
Personally, if we lose TikTok, where am I going to go for videos about huskies behaving badly? I mean,
I'm a TikTok addict, so I love it. But that our attention span, the average attention span, has gone from I think it was a minute 15 to 44 seconds now.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's how long you have to capture somebody's attention enough that they want to jump through hoops for you.
Yeah.
So of course, employer brand is part of that.
Yes.
But I think that the top three, of course, are the things that you mentioned. And let's stick to pay transparency here and answer Jim's question here. How would you advise employers on the critical nature of giving a reasonable range, right? Because when I think about me applying for a job, I'm going to want to know that before, and because of this, the state and the place that I am in my career, if you're not going to offer me enough money that I can maintain my lifestyle that I've grown accustomed to for the last 25 years, I won't be applying. We won't go any further. Why should that be any different for a new early career hiring? It shouldn't be any different because they're starting their lives, right?
Yeah.
So how would you, what kind of advice would you give in this? How do we resolve or solve for the flow of applicant?
So two things. I've gotten to know Jim a little bit.
Yes.
And my guess is that if the software allowed him to, he would have taken that word reasonable and he would have italicized it, bolded it, and underscored it, because that's the operative word.
Right.
I've seen stories of employers posting jobs where the low end of the range is $25,000 and the high end of the range is 2.5 million. Right. That's a big FU to the law and to the requirements.
Right? Yeah.
And what comes around will come around. Those employers, I hope, are going to be receiving letters from the Federal Trade Commission telling them that they have violated the false advertising laws.
Totally.
There's no need for legislation to require employers to post actual reasonable ranges.
Right.
You're not allowed to engage in false advertising. There are already those laws in the books. So talent acquisition may not be familiar with it, but the marketing experts, like folks like you that are advising them, I would think that none of you guys that are good, and certainly both of you are, would ever tell an employer, oh, just make shit up.
Yeah.
Now,
Never.
I think that there is a reasonable objection that some employers will have for some roles. And at College Recruiter, this has happened to us. We were thinking we would hire someone and it would be $60,000 to $80,000. Okay. The right candidate comes along who has everything we were looking for and something else that's really good. We just didn't think that there was somebody out there like that. And it's like, okay, now rather than 80, this person's actually worth 110.
Right.
Just because we advertised for a role and estimated the salary at 60 to 80 does not preclude us from paying that person 110. Yeah. What candidate that's applied for a job that maxes out at 80 would say no to 110? I mean, it's just so, and so then I hear the other objection, which I think is a false objection. And that is, if I tell Rayanne that the role is 60 to 80,000 and I extend her an offer and she says yes, and I say, Rayanne, you're going to start at 70. And then Rayanne comes back and says, whoa, wait a second. I thought it was up to 80. Okay, that's where I say, Rayanne, you're absolutely right. But the job posting, remember where it said 2 to 5 years of experience, and you have 2. Right. If you had 5, you'd be at the top end of the range. So let's sit down in 3 months and see how good your work is, your productivity. And if you are performing at that $80,000 level, hell yeah, I'm going to be the first one to fight for that raise for you.
Like, 3 months, come on.
Isn't that part of the job of recruiting and hiring somebody?
Absolutely. You know, I think what thank goodness more states are implementing the pay transparency law, but I think when it was very fascinating when Colorado was the first and the only at that time, a few years back, and companies were using in their job description saying, we are not accepting Colorado applications because they were not willing to provide the pay transparency that's required in Colorado. And I was just like blown away.
And we wonder why the Great Resignation happened.
Right. That blew my mind. That was my eyebrow back then.
Isn't it okay though? Isn't it okay? Shouldn't we encourage organizations that should be dead to do
Yes.
things like that?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
doesn't that hasten the demise of
Yes.
these backward thinking organizations and then free up their talent to actually go to work in good places?
Right.
You don't want to hire someone from Colorado. You don't want to hire someone from California, New York City, this state, this state,
Washington.
this state, this state.
There's so
Now, I
many.
mean, if you look at in the European Union, pay transparency is transparency is
Great
almost a
transparency.
given. It's almost a given everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, it reminds me of employers in like the 50s and 60s, especially. It still continues somewhat to this day, and basically saying, I'm not going to hire a woman for that role. I'm not going to hire someone who's black. I'm not going to hire someone who's gay. I'm not. There's no one out there that wants to work. And
For
it's
that kind
like,
of mindset.
you know what? Go for it.
Yeah.
Put yourself out of business. Good riddance.
Right. It's unfortunate that sometimes it didn't really have to come down to laws to like provide pay transparency. It just feels like the way some of the businesses run, unless they're at legal risk, they're really not going to change behavior because it's right. It's just unfortunate that's how things work, and that's why when it comes down to so many aspects of diversity hiring or just DEIB, it's not diversity because that's just one part of it, but I just feel like it's very unfortunate because it's like, we've been seeing so many of the amazing DEIB leadership being one of the first to go in organizations,
right,
to cut DEIB from their cost, right, during these very tough times, and it really perplexes me as to. You all said you're committed to this. You brought on these amazing leaders. They've been doing great work. And all of a sudden you say, I'm sorry.
That's an expense we can't afford.
Yeah.
So, and that goes to the heart of the issue for me.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I think to get rid of that function that is just, it's so wrong in so many different levels. I don't think we have to get into all of them. We could all talk here for the next 3 hours, but I know everybody has things to do. But I think the three of us at least can agree on that for sure, easily. I would actually put some blame on the DEI professionals themselves for not being proactive in making the business case for why it's important. So Rayanne basically referenced the money part of it.
Right.
If the C-suite knew before those decisions had to be made what positive impact on the bottom line of the organization, better diversity, inclusion, equity was having, then the C-suite would say that's untouchable. You can't touch that because that would cost this company way too much money. So we need to save some money, but it's not going to be from there. Right. So it's an area that HR and talent acquisition needs to get better at is translating their impact on the organization's bottom line in real dollars and cents.
Data.
It really does. Data transparency. I mean, it is absolutely. This is the ongoing conversation always in terms of how do we get perceived to be more strategic? I think I've been reading a lot of things, a lot of C-suite thinks talent acquisition is still just tactical. It's not a strategic role in an organization. And of course, we work very close to it, and C-suite seems to be a little way distant in terms of really understanding the impact. But certainly I think it comes down to how do you reinforce the communication back to the C-suite about the impacts of the importance of these roles like talent acquisition and HR, people operations, things that have historically been looked upon as cost centers, and how do we like you said, how do we help them make that convert their language into business talk that C-suite then can really digest very more objectively and really realize
money and numbers. That's
money and numbers. It comes down to
translate it to money and numbers.
So just a short. It's not quite a tangent. But it's more of an analogy that for the nerds amongst us, maybe they'll enjoy this. So one of the Star Trek movies, nerd alert, there's this scene where they're teasing Captain Kirk, like the head of the Enterprise, about how he cheated when he was in the academy in school. And there was this like scenario or assessment kind of simulation that he was supposed to go through. And the whole point of it was that there were no good options. They wanted to see how you performed under pressure. They didn't expect you to win the scenario.
Yeah.
He changed the code to allow himself the ability to win. And he said something in the movie about like, I don't believe in the existence of no good options. I created one for myself and then went for it. I see something like that in the HRTA, let's call it a paradigm of the C-suite looking at us as cost centers. Don't play that game.
Yeah.
If you can't win under the rules as they exist, change the rules.
Yeah.
Show them that stop talking about cost per hire. Start talking about this cohort of people that I just brought in, and we're paying them $800,000 a year. In the first 6 months, the gross profit that we earned from them was 2.2 million, and the net profit was 900,000. So in 6 months, I added $100,000 to the bottom line. You do that, you've got no budgetary problems at all.
Never.
Yeah, and we used to say that we used to use the numbers from what it is costing us to have an empty seat.
Yeah,
right? That was the way to get around cost per hire and why it's so important, why speed is so important. We used to talk about the cost of an empty seat. But this is a much more proactive, positive way to engage the C-suite. This is the profit availability.
Right.
By having the right people in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. And Rayanne, the cost of having that empty seat, I still think is a really good, something very good to talk about. It also, and this is probably going to sound a little bit bad, but for those of us who have done sales work, a powerful motivator is fear. So that argument is selling the fact that speed to hire matters, and you're using fear as the motivator. If I don't fill that seat, I'm going to lose. There's the fear on X dollars in revenue or Y dollars in reduced expenses or whatever it may be. So I think we would all prefer to sell from a positive standpoint.
Sure.
But the reality is that some people respond better to fear arguments. So you got to know who you're selling to. And in an organization, if you're the head of TA, and you're asking for budget, you are selling. And you just, use the great sales tactics that are out there.
For sure. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because when I talk to a lot of the HR tech providers, solution providers, they quickly just lean in on the basic metrics to help TA, quote unquote, with productivity and kind of these activity metrics. I haven't really seen a heck of a lot coming out of HR tech, recruiting tech, work tech, whatever, all of the technology solution providers to really aid and helping them convert their activity metrics into revenue business metrics. That doesn't really, that is non-existing right now. And that's why I just feel like so much recruiting tech, the whole technology space is challenged with selling because they can't really help build the business case. They haven't figured out or they haven't really reshifted their mindset on value metrics. Like you talked about speed to hire. That is having just come off of working at Humanly, it's the one thing that I heard from all the customers is they need to get to same day hiring. That was their new goal because the more that they're understaffed, the more they have to pay out in overtime, taxes, and all sorts of trickle down effect of not having staffing done. But so we introduced the whole same day hiring concept, as a key metric of indication of, and if there was a new one, it wasn't really about time to hire, cost per hire, or anything like that. It was you're like you mentioned, the speed to hire, because the faster I get somebody in that position filled, the faster they can be productive. But so I feel like for all the vendor solutions that are out there, shift your mindset. Let's get out of it's table stakes to capture activity metrics. We need to help push and get consult TA to help them get to that next level. And that's where I don't feel a ton of technologies are out there doing.
Yeah. If only there were a couple of consultants that could help employers figure that out.
Yeah, totally.
If only a couple of people existed.
If only.
If only there weren't a broadcast right now making the suggestion.
Hello, everybody. No, I mean, when you think of, kind of spotlights also the whole complexity of technology in our space, right? It's very complex, and there really isn't anybody owning true technology stack. IT needs to come back into the picture as really a true leader and helping develop especially with the involvement of AI, their AI strategy, and then really kind of then get everybody involved to contribute and such, because right now, they're used, back in the days when I was at Virtual Edge in 2006, there were actually a lot of involvement from consultants to help them with simple things like selection, because there wasn't as many technologies out there, but certainly they helped help do the right things in the steps of selecting technology that best fits their organization. And so I do feel like this missing component of consultancy to help kind of thread everything together, because right now everything is still compartmentalized.
Yeah, if I might build off of something that you just said, Bennett, that it just sort of jumped out at me, and I think it really pertains to the early career hiring conversation that we're having now too, is that one of the things that's really encouraging to me from the customers that we work with, mostly enterprise level government agencies, right? They're doing a lot of high volume hiring. And you kind of asked about this earlier too, about sort of the adoption of technology. One of the things that's really encouraging to me is there's been a massive improvement in using data. Until a few years ago, almost all of our customers would justify decisions that they were making by using data. They would make the decision, and then they would later find a data point that justified the decision. Okay. Why are you going to those schools? Why are you doing this? And they've already decided to those schools. They've already interviewed. They've already hired. And then they would kind of look back and make this sort of retroactive argument to justify what they're doing. Okay. So were they using data? Absolutely. Were they using it to drive their decisions? Absolutely not. Now what I see with almost all of our customers, same kinds of customers, sometimes different people, sometimes they've just skilled up, is that they're actually using data to drive their decisions. And an example of that is until a couple of years ago, almost no employers, there were some, but almost none, were using what the industry calls ECPA, the effective cost per application. You pay a job board $1,000, you get 10 applications, your effective cost per application is $100. Okay. And then you can compare different job boards and say, how much do you cost? It's sort of an even metric.
Yes.
Okay. Until a couple of years ago, almost no organizations were doing that. Now they almost all are. Now we can dicker about, is that the right measurement or not? But the mind shift to say, I don't care that much if you had an ad on the Super Bowl. I don't care that much about if you have partnerships with those schools or how you attract your candidate traffic, or whether you have 3 blog articles or 3 million blog articles, whether your color scheme is red or green, whether it looks out of date or not. What I care about is the effectiveness and the efficiency. Let's look at the data and let's use that to choose where. And so part of that is programmatic technology. It's kind of permeating through that. You run your ads, you use sources that actually are producing the results.
Totally.
Not that make you feel good necessarily, but they're actually producing results.
Yeah.
There's been a massive improvement in that area.
Yeah.
I think as an industry, both like the early career and just broader TA, I think we're going to be quickly moving away from just how many applications did we get for how many dollars. It's a good step, but it's a journey. I think we have this conversation 2 years from now. I think we're going to be talking about the effective cost per quality application. And there's a lot of debate right now about what quality is. John Duarte has a company called Go Jobs and does a bunch of different things, but he has like a chat bot. He's big into texting applicants. He said the other day on LinkedIn that what he's advocating for, and I thought it was great, is the measure of quality is whether you interview the person. So if I apply to your job and you never interview me, it's because I didn't meet your minimal level of qualifications, right? I wasn't of enough interest to you for you to even talk to me for 10 minutes,
right?
By phone. But if you talk to me for 10 minutes, I meet some minimal threshold.
Yeah.
And at that point, the sourcing tool should basically get a plus.
Totally.
For that, right? Like you did your job. You brought to me a candidate that I was interested enough in to talk to them for 10 minutes.
Yes.
If there are biases built into that prelim process, right, which there are, then can we blame the sourcing wasn't effective because of the biases that were built in, right? So how do we get past that? I mean, there's so much.
That's your problem. That's not
I know.
mine.
It is my problem. We are at 8 minutes left in our conversation. So, Bennett, do we have a really key point we want to get across here with?
I mean, I love this, what Stephen mentioned about being data driven, right? I think that is the more. I think we also have a lot within the tech stack of whether it's early career or just in general, that there's still some major data gaps. Right. I think so. It's very hard to truly be data driven when you still have some key gaps. What I will say, the one point I will say
is part of the data.
Yeah. But what I will say for folks is, when you talk about, upskilling or up leveling your positioning and fighting for the funds that you need to support your different programs is this notion of figuring out how to get to a benchmark, right? Where is our starting point? And then as I've learned over time is like, there needs to be an outcome. You need to have a goal. Like in order to talk about achieving your goal, you have to have had some perspective of where you started from. So for me, that is, to be impactful, to make a difference, to get the attention of the C-suite, really having a starting point of data points, knowing what your goal, your impact you want to make, and then building your case, your very simple before and after case back to the C-suite to say, here's what we accomplished, here's where we started, here's where we are right now, here's where we anticipate to be down the road. But
what's the expression? You can't manage what you can't measure.
Yes. Let's get back to the root of that one. That is so true.
Solve it, right? I mean, you can't manage it or solve. If there's an issue, you can't solve it. So
and if you go like when Rayanne was talking a few minutes ago about the time to hire, right? The opportunity cost of having an open seat. If you go to your CFO and you talk about that metric, they're going to say, you know what? There's my door. Don't slam it on your way out. It's meaningless. It doesn't. That's not going to help your CFO do his or her job. Right. But if you say by having an open seat and the cost is this, and this is the impact on the bottom line, that's that next step.
Yeah,
I get that doing that might be beyond the capability. The way somebody thinks, are they math oriented? Do they have the time in the day, whatever, to do those?
Totally.
Come to your vendors, because the vendors who are good are going to embrace the opportunity to justify their existence. So if we have a customer where they've said, and we have loads that do this now, our average cost per application is $25. Some more and more and more of our customers are just transparently sharing that with us.
Awesome.
Now we have that benchmark.
Right.
Now we know when we deliver it at $22, we're doing a good job. If it's $32, we're not, and we need to be looking to improve better.
Right.
So if we're at $22 and we know their goal is 25, we're going to go to that customer and we're going to make sure they know it's 22 because they're going to give us more of that wallet.
Yeah, totally.
TA can do the same thing with its C-suite.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We all need to partner together to help support them and get them over that.
Right.
Get them to give them the tools to be able to do that, because it's, and such. So awesome.
So Jim mentioned there are a substantial number of tools that remove bias from the sourcing. Yes, there are, but not all of them are great, and they are built on biases too. I mean, so I don't know how. Even AI tools. I mean, if you were to type into an AI tool, this is and if you haven't seen Jim Stroud's latest video on using AI and the Myers-Briggs test to build out a job description for somebody that fits the personality that you want in that role, which I have a lot of question with anyway.
Right.
He had to keep adjusting his inputs to get the right output, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody who doesn't know a lot about technology or AI like Jim does and understands that you have to change these different inputs, then you're just going to accept the first answer that comes back or the first response that comes back and use that, even though it has bias built into it, because the parameters are biased. So
no, for sure. I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge in the AI world. It's going to be in the AI world is I learned this when I did my webinar yesterday on ChatGPT versus conversational AI. There is a new skill set that is evolving, and that is called fact checking. That fact checking in AI, it needs to be pervasive, and this is why. This is why IT is going to really
agreed
take control over all of the AI strategy in the organization, because way too much risk, too much exposure, especially with all the new laws that are out there coming in from New York and in Illinois and all that type of stuff about AI. So that we have to be cognizant about those. And the reality is, it is AI and humans, right? That's at the end of the day when you're going to. It's AI and humans.
Remember when we were so worried about discrimination? Whoa, hold on. When we were so worried, that was my Skype call almost came on there. When we were worried about discrimination because we were using social media for hiring. Remember when we were worried about video interviewing and the discrimination that would come from that? You think
if I see their photo on LinkedIn, am I breaking the law?
Or their name, or the college they went to, all these different things. You think that isn't built into an AI that's been built by a person?
Yeah.
So I mean,
as a white male, I hope so.
Yeah. As a woke white male.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. This has been an enlightening conversation, a lot to digest and consider and such. And again, thank you so much, Stephen, for joining Rayanne and I and really helping kind of bring to life early career hiring and some of the opportunities, challenges.
So much more to think about. I can imagine, Stephen, when you look at your mission statement that has evolved and your, the work, the business process that has evolved for you, I can't imagine how much it has evolved because of what has changed so much over the last 10, 20 years in this arena of business. It's just astounding when we look at, and exciting, how much technology has impacted it, how much awareness, wisdom that we have gained individually, right, as we toil away in this industry. So I really appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge, your experience, expertise, and wisdom. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to you guys being on one of my podcasts.
Oh, that would be great. This is our 30th show. So welcome and thanks for being a part of our 30th, celebrating the 30th show of On the Edge. I told Bennett during the week that it was our 30th. He couldn't believe it. So
time passes way too fast.
And enjoy Boise, one of the prettiest places in the country.
I'm flying out today and can't wait.
You're not driving out?
I drove there from Portland. I flew into Portland, drove from Portland to Boise. Now I'm flying home to Southern California today.
There we go. Awesome.
Just in time because there's snow outside. No.
You didn't go south enough.
I did go south enough. That's exactly right. Okay, guys. Have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.